and welcome back to another episode of the Games Gone By podcast. I'm your host, Adam, and joining me as always, Jeff and Austin. How you guys doing?
I am doing great, gaming expert and enthusiast, ready to talk about the year that has happened in 2024.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Sorry, what? The year's over? What's going on? Huh? What
It really has gone by fast. We've been doing this podcast for like a year and 3 months now, which is crazy.
Well done, boys.
No, but that's sort of the theme of today is that like we want to recap the year, both in the industry and on, this little radio show, the online radio show we've created here. But we'll start with news around the industry. We'll get right to what was one of the biggest headlines this year is the utter disaster of Concord's release. Austin, I see you have it phrased here as Concord releases and then shuts down almost immediately, which is not an exaggeration at all. It was about 13 or 14 days, I believe.
Yeah, it lasted less time than like most games, like run times. Like Metaphor, I think's runtime is probably longer than Concord existed.
It takes longer to play most games than this one was allowed to be like out in the sun, right? And for those that don't know, this was a hero shooter that some studio had made that Sony found interesting enough to buy like halfway through development. And there's no hard numbers on this, but it's estimated that all said and done between acquiring the studio, continuing to fund the product, and the marketing push, $400 million budget. And it's thought to have made around $100,000, which is just crazy. And I don't even know that it made that much because I believe they ended up just refunding all of the copies before they shut the game down, right? So they really made nothing.
There was talk about a potential revival of this, like they were going to try and revive Concord and maybe do something with it, and they ended up shutting down the studio, and there's just nothing to be gleaned from Concord. It was really awkward watching the secret level project that released, which is like a bunch of little shorts about video games. And one of the shorts that they had built up, I guess to expand the world of Concord, was a Concord short. And it was really awkward watching that, knowing that game just will never see the light of day again.
It's crazy that you would plan out part of your marketing. It's like, yeah, it's just like 4 or 5 months after the release, we'll have this cool thing on Amazon, and it can't even fucking make it to that.
It's a really sad situation for the people involved with it, for sure. But it just goes to show that like the art style and the character designs and everything that was like created around it, the world created around it, just was not appealing.
See, Jeff, I don't know if you followed this very closely, so I'll just give you a little context. Basically, when this game came out, everyone immediately were like, this is the ugliest bunch of heroes I've ever seen. You remember in the last episode when Bobby Kotick was like, oh, these are just beautiful champions. Like, these are just the coolest characters I've ever seen. The world collectively decided the opposite of that almost immediately.
I am so impressed that someone had the gall to release a game that looked this bad in 2024. Like, I don't know. I would love to. Maybe we just have to wait 10 years to get the inside story of why Concord failed. We can read about that and talk about it.
I was about to say, I'm waiting for the Jason Schreier book on Concord. It's going to happen eventually.
One of the first things I noticed when I was looking through some of the characters is that like they were trying to do something sort of subversive where it was like, oh, instead of your tank being this traditionally big thing, we're going to make it this girl in a trench coat. And then your healer is this giant armored chick with like a minigun. And I kind of understand what they're going for, something just a little more unique. But when it's a multiplayer game and your ability to like visually communicate what you're up against immediately is so important, terrible idea. Just terrible idea.
Yeah, I don't know if a multiplayer shooter, competitive shooter, is like the venue to be changing like aesthetic paradigms, because that is a great way to just make your game really hard to play out of the gate.
Well, moving on to something else, probably more sad personally for us, especially Austin, is that Game Informer shut down this year in August. And it actually started in August 1991, so it was an exactly 33-year run, which is pretty crazy. Austin, how long ago were you, like, following Game Informer?
I probably started following Game Informer closely, like, early high school days. So, like, probably early 2010. I had kind of started to follow it closely. I actually got involved in the Game Informer community. I would watch a lot of their content. I was part of like Facebook groups and things that were related to Game Informer. I even like wrote for their blog page for a while. Like I was big in the Game Informer sphere. So watching kind of all of their staff fade away in the last couple of years, like ever since probably 2017 or 2018, they've had a fair bit of turnover in their staff, and they've been owned by GameStop since 2000, and ever since then, it's just been kind of hit or miss for them as a magazine. But watching them fall off the last couple of years was really sad. Like this made sense that this happened. I'm not shocked by it, but it is sad.
When GameStop purchased them, it really became a thing where they were like trying to push like a bundle of like a Game Informer subscription with the GameStop like Supreme membership or whatever the hell it was.
The Pro or whatever it is, whatever it's called.
Yeah, and it really just stopped existing for the sake of being like a game in which informs you, or a magazine which informs you on games. And instead it was just like a synergistic marketing push to get you to come to GameStop. And I think, the writing was on the wall the second that happened. Almost surprised it kicked around as long as it did.
I think what really helped them make it through that was a really strong group of like core editors. They had a lot of strong personalities, and their writing was like, their reviews and stuff were interesting, at least to me. And it was hard to separate it from the GameStop element of it all, but the actual writing didn't feel like a marketing push. It just so happened that like you couldn't separate the two, because that was the only way to really get Game Informer, was by getting it through GameStop.
I didn't really read a lot of Game Informer. I was kind of a EGM guy growing up, Electronic Gaming Monthly. Jeff, you strike me as more of like a Nintendo Power. What were you?
Hey, I also read my fair share of Nintendo Power. It's okay.
No, you call them like you see it. 100%. If I was going to pick up another technology magazine, I couldn't tell you. The only thing I've ever actually subscribed to is Nintendo Power.
Excellent. Well, rest in peace to GameStop, or Game Informer. GameStop's still not dead somehow.
GameStop's soon to follow.
Should we talk about that for a minute? Brick and mortar game stores? It's perplexing to me.
It is crazy. They're basically just like have all turned into places to buy Funko Pop dolls, because it's hard to sustain on actual just physical game sales anymore.
Oh yeah, that makes
they sell a lot of like game related merch that people like.
I only see them as a place for people to like drop their kids off when they're at the mall, let them hang out on the PS5 while you go shop.
I'm sorry, the mall? Is that something that exists near you?
Oh, sorry.
So brick and mortar malls? Like...
If you live... Malls are kind of a thing in the inner suburbs still, so just so you know.
I have like 3 of them within like 10 minutes from me, so I get it.
I live like 2 blocks from one. There's one and a few metro stops up. Yeah, they're popular around Northern Virginia still.
There's one in Athens that is like basically just been a JCPenney's and a retro game store and nothing else for like the past 4 or 5 years. And the retro game store actually just closed last month.
Man.
But yeah, I was actually I was in like downtown the other day, and I was in some like artisan honey store, and I noticed that they were selling like coasters with Taylor Swift album art, and I was like, this is the equivalent of like the Funko Pop dolls for tiny artisan stores, because apparently just selling your main product doesn't fucking cut it anymore. and you have to use like dolls and Taylor Swift to get people in your store, I guess.
You need that really high margin item, to sustain the rest of your business.
Well, rest in peace to Game Informer. Move on to the series of layoffs that occurred across the industries the last couple years. Now, I was using this site called like Obsidian Nut something. I can't remember exactly, but it was tallying them all up by publisher. So it was around 14,000 across the whole industry last year. 2,700 of those were at Microsoft alone, various studios, right? Some of that was like Activision, Blizzard, Bethesda, etc. So all their little subsidiaries. Riot had 500 or so. Sony had 1,300. Half of that was fucking Concord. EA was 670. Ubisoft about 400. This was kind of continuing a trend that was happening in 2023 as well. Basically just like during the pandemic, when all of these, conditions were right for new projects, all of these studios started them. But like, it just takes so fucking long to make a game now that half of them didn't get out before they realized that like, oh God, interest rates are going back up and demand's going back down and people are going back outside. And that's how we got some Concords. There's probably a lot of other Concords around the corner that were just smart enough to can themselves halfway through. But ultimately, like, all of this just sucks because, like, 14,000 fucking people had to now look for a new job in an industry that already, like, most people talk about never wanting to fucking step foot in.
It's definitely a really sad thing. Seeing there's a whole, like, Wikipedia page that's, like, 24 video game industry layoffs. Like, it's like, this is such a noticeable and prominent thing happening. And it's all the reasons that you stated. It just really sucks because to make good games, you need good game developers, and losing so many developers is like, it's just going to make games, it's going to push them back, it's going to make them harder to make. Like, it's all those things. And then, of course, people, need to find a new job, and that sucks.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's really a subset of the larger just tech industry layoffs in general. Like the American technology scene is just reorganizing in the post-pandemic world. So I'm honestly a little impressed that the games industry didn't suffer more often, because like you guys said, it's already an industry no one wants to go into. It's this weird intersection of entertainment and technology, and like technology outside of video games you can make more money in, and entertainment is really hard. So I'm genuinely always shocked to see like a large studio that pulls off a great title, a place like Helldivers 2. But we'll talk about that later.
Hey. Yeah, this is really unfortunate. It does concern me a little, simply for a lot of standpoints, but the main one being like you were saying, this isn't an attractive industry to work in for a lot of reasons. And I worry that like this is going to have long-term effects for like the talent pool, and that the next 10 to 15 years might involve like a shortage of people wanting to work on video games, because we have several years where everyone looked at 2023 and 2024 and said, never mind, I'm changing major, changing career path, whatever else. So we'll see. But yeah, not a fun year for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's really tied into all the studio closures that happened at the same time. Like, all of this was kind of all a part of the bigger thing. But we lost several major studios this year, with Arcane Austin, who did Redfall, which that was a disaster all on its own.
Complete disaster. Yeah.
But they couldn't redeem anything from that. So,
Jeff, did you play any of the Prey games?
No, not a single one.
Perhaps.
I did play Dishonored a little bit, but it's been a long time.
So they have two different studios, and like the main one that works on Dishonored, I think, is the one that's still together, because that was Arcane Leon, and like in France.
Yeah.
But their Austin one had made Prey, which didn't sell super well, but was pretty well received. And so people were kind of excited for their next project. And then it was announced, at some point, that it was a live service shooter. And everyone's like, well, that's weird, because that's not what they make at all. And then sure enough, like, it comes out and it just sucks. Like, God, it was free on Game Pass, and me and Austin could not stand to play it for more than 40 minutes.
I was about to say, like, it was free and we played it, and it was just like, this isn't even worth putting in the time for free.
That's incredible.
Well, which is a shame, because like, I think Arcane Austin is a good studio. I mean, I didn't personally love the Prey games either.
Well,
but
it was. But
ooh, ow. Well, we also lost Ready at Dawn this year, which had done the Order 1866, which I played about half of. I don't know if you played that one at all.
That was the $60 tech demo for the PS3?
Yes,
PS4,
but it was pretty good. The half of it that I played, at least.
And it was like a 6-hour game in which you could like go through. You could like hold triangle to just look at your gun and turn your gun around in circles so that you could see the model.
It was really impressive from a technical standpoint.
It was, but it was like, you're making a game, dude.
Fair enough. And then, of course, Tango. I think it's Tango Gameworks or Softworks or something like that. Shut down.
Softworks.
And they were the Evil Within company, and they also released Ghostwire Tokyo, and their most recent game was the like surprise, really well received critical darling Hi-Fi Rush that came out last year.
I think, unfortunately, Hi-Fi Rush just wasn't enough to save them after like their last two games had not sold at all. But the lucky part of that, which I guess is this next section here, is that Krafton, who is a Korean publisher known for mostly like publishing a bunch of bullshit, creating like mobile and free-to-play games, but also PUBG, which, Players Unknown Battleground, probably the biggest thing they're associated with. Bluehole is like their subsidiary. But they swooped in and were basically like, hey, we're trying to reach out to everyone that worked at the studio to hire them back, because like we were able to acquire it from Microsoft, and a handful of people already got new jobs, but anyone that worked at like at Tango, send us a message and we'll see about getting you back on the team. So that was pretty cool. Who knows what that's going to turn into? It might just be another failed or canceled game, but it's nice to see them get like that chance.
They definitely said that they wanted to work on Hi-Fi Rush some more, like that IP and that property. I think that's technically the only property they even got the rights for. I think like Ghostwire Tokyo, Evil Within are still with whoever. I guess Microsoft is who it would still be with. I think they only got the rights for Hi-Fi Rush, but I think they do want to work on like a furthering of that IP, which could be cool. I mean, I know that game was a critical darling. I know, like, I don't know how well it sold, but the people who enjoyed it really enjoyed it. So,
Jeff, did you catch wind of this game at all, Hi-Fi Rush?
Hi-Fi Rush, I've only heard of it, well, because of the headlines and because of how much y'all have talked about it. But no, I couldn't. Anytime someone says Hi-Fi Rush, I just think of Jet Set Radio, which is not related.
but kind of is.
I understand the confusion.
Cel-shaded rhythm game, too. So,
Okay. All right. Maybe I'm not that far off.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, it was like an action platformer in which if your attacks were in time with the beat, they were more effective. And it just had this really cool bassy soundtrack and a lot of like cool rock music during the cutscenes and stuff. It's really like music influenced and kind of like tried to incorporate an action game into a rhythm game. It was pretty fun. I didn't quite finish it, but it was definitely unique. And I kind of wish that it wasn't on Game Pass because I might have paid money for it and maybe they wouldn't have closed down. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic, is just like some of these games cannibalizing their sales with like Ubisoft Plus and Game Pass. But
yeah, the intersection of being part of a subscription versus just being bought, like I still haven't purchased Star Wars Outlaws, but they got 2 months of
have you
subscription
beaten
out of me. No, still haven't, right.
That sounds right. That sounds right. Too much time in Total War,
Yeah, I know. And I'd either have to resubscribe. At that point, I'd be paying them almost the full price of the game, or buy the full price of the game. So now I just stopped playing, and so I'm wondering how common of a scenario that is.
yeah, now it's just time to look up the Vader cutscene and call it a conclusion. So,
Oh, definitely.
moving on to another tragedy, that of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. This was not quite on the level of Concord, but it probably every bit as disappointing because this was from Rocksteady, who had done all of the Batman Arkham games, and people were like, "Oh, what did they release recently? Like, someone did a Gotham Knights because they were busy working on this, right?"
Yes, yeah. Like Warner Brothers, like in-house studio or whatever that they have released Gotham Knights.
So everyone was hyped up about this because it was a game that Rocksteady, the makers of the Arkham series, had been working on for years, and this was like their big project. It was a fucking live service shooter, and it's like, how did this happen again right after Redfall? And,
People keep chasing this live service thing, and I think it's just stopped working.
But the worst part is none of these supervillains were associated with fucking guns, and they just gave them to us. And
like
it didn't
Killer
work.
Shark, why not have a gun?
I mean, in their defense, has any Suicide Squad property done well in the last 10 years? I feel like
The second movie did okay, right?
Well, even the first movie that everybody hated, I think, made a decent amount of money. And I think the second one was very well received. I don't know how well it did, like, box office wise, but
Yeah, can't fool me twice, but
right, it was a better movie, but I don't know if it did well financially.
it's such a cool idea, the Suicide Squad, and it just keeps getting bungled.
Yeah, and
it really does. I've been through this hype cycle for one Suicide Squad property or another, what feels like this entire decade, and I'm just waiting for someone to actually do it well.
I mean, this game did so bad that it was free on Amazon in the summer, like for Prime Day or whatever. They just like gave this game away. That's how I got it, and we played it for a little while, and it was like not great, but
There were aspects of it that were a lot of fun, especially I thought like the traversal. But like, the thing that these Arkham games do, where when there's a story segment with dialogue, your character like holds their hand up to their FBI microphone and slow walks while the dialogue plays. That fucking sucks in a game with 3 other people. Like,
yeah, it does not work. Most story things just don't work.
constant obstacles to get to the next objective. It's like, here's the next objective marker, but hold on, walk your way there very slowly as I tell you shit you don't care about. And that was every 10 minutes. And it's just, the pacing was miserable.
Yeah, all future plans for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League have been canceled. They released the last bit of content, I think, like this month. And then they've canceled all future plans, any future, like, DLC stuff. There's no more live service elements to this game. So
Jesus.
It's already down the trash, and Rocksteady's, like, legacy is tarnished forever.
These games just take so long to make that, like, if they fuck up, then your studio's over. Like, it's done. This was Rocksteady. This was supposed to be their big thing. This was like going to be their magnum opus, and it was a piece of shit. And now their legacy's. I mean, if the studio even stays open, it won't have most of the people there, right? Didn't the leads already take off?
Yeah, I think the leads took off in the middle of the development of this game because they were like, we don't want to do a live service shooter.
Terrible. Well, moving on. As the world will do every time Suicide Squad happens. Nintendo versus Palworld. Jeff, did you play Palworld?
I played Palworld for a minute because like you can't have that good of like a Pokemon knockoff and not get my attention. I just it wasn't quite as much fun as the nostalgia of just playing Pokemon Red on my emulator. And the edgy Pokemon with guns are definitely hilarious, but like that wasn't a motivator for me to play.
Yeah, me, Austin, and our friend Connor, we had a server going for a little while. We played a couple weeks. You know, we did it. I guess we definitely did our due diligence. Built up a base.
I think we put like 30-ish hours into it.
It was a lot of fun, but also in a way that I was like, I think I've had my fill here. And their updates are just like, look, bigger and more Pokemon. Like, yeah, but arguably the least interesting part of it. I liked building up the base and turning them into slaves, but like actually fighting with them and stuff was not really all that great, I thought.
Yeah.
But so it just kind of was a survival game with a Pokemon element that got stale after a while. But anyway, the real point of the story is what, Austin? That Nintendo's doing Nintendo things? And,
is that Nintendo hates when anybody does anything that's even remotely similar to their IP? Yes.
Yeah. Which, like, with this, though, I mean, it is, it's a lot closer than other things might be, right? Like, you can definitely see the argument.
Well, Nintendo has specifically sued them for infringing on 3 different patents in Japan and is seeking $65,000 approximately. It's like 10 million yen or something. Whatever the conversion rate is crazy.
Wait, really? It's that low?
Yeah, well, it's really not that much. But the thing that is the bigger thing is that it's preventing future sales in Japan.
Okay.
If they, win the lawsuit, they wouldn't be able to sell in Japan anymore going forward. So, and they can only sue in Japan because that's where they hold the patents, I believe is how it works. So it wouldn't necessarily affect their like U.S. sales or European market sales, but it's just been a back and forth battle with them since the game released, as I'm sure they knew it would be. Like, I'm sure they knew when they put this game out that there was no way they could get away with this very blatant Pokemon ripoff without Nintendo being upset by it.
Mm-hmm. I would, honestly, I would have sympathy for Nintendo, except they've done, I don't know, nothing innovative with that IP in a decade. Sorry, Austin, don't come at me.
No, I mean, as someone who's played every single Pokemon game, as we discussed in our Pokemon episode, I would agree with you.
Yeah, what was your line? Something like the latest one plays exactly the same as Red. And
yeah, like you may as well pick up Pokemon Red and just play that because it's the same thing as the new games. So at least Palworld tried to do something different with like the base building elements and the like real time combat.
Mm-hmm. But then they still like fell back to like, well, what if we just add more Pokemon? Like, no, it's not the number of monsters.
A new region that's vaguely Japanese and has Pokemon.
And I think a specific patent that Nintendo is suing for is the idea of catching something with a spear. So,
what?
Like, yeah, apparently they have a patent on that. I don't know how, but like
Japanese
the idea
sound wild.
The idea of catching something with a ball. So like if they win, they would have to completely like change the mechanism, or I guess the tool.
Can they throw a cube?
Maybe that would look stupid, but maybe.
Pokecubes. That's what.
Pokecubes.
Well, look. Speaking of franchises that constantly fail to innovate,
Ew.
NCAA college football game returned this year. Austin, when was the last time they had one of these? It was like 2013 or something?
It was a long time ago. I didn't actually look at the date, but 2013 sounds right, or maybe even before that. It's been a long time. It says a decade-long hiatus, so yeah, I imagine about 2013.
I don't know if there was an actual lawsuit, but I know they were basically concerned as players began to sue the NCAA for all kinds of things, and it was like, oh, are we actually going to have to like compensate people for this? Let's just stop making it entirely. And so that's more or less what happened for 10 years. But then now that all of those NIL deals, the name, image, likeness deals, are throughout NCAA football, and that's just like taken over the college game, it's just like much more, I think, acceptable that we're going to like toss the players some money for this. And I don't even think it's that much, right? I think it's like everyone gets like a $1,200 check or something. But at least people are getting something for being in the game. And you can also I assume they can actually use the players' names now.
Yes. Yep. They have all I've played about 10 to 11 hours of the new game, and it's got all of the starting players from all of the major colleges. There's a couple that didn't agree to use their likeness, so you don't have those players, but the majority of them are there. It's got the same roster that you would have if you were to watch the game live on TV, And that's probably the coolest part of this. That and the element of presentation that college football has that maybe the NFL doesn't have in the same way. The band, the fans, the mascot, it's fun to go to a USF football game and then play a USF football game and see the same formation in pregame, see all the players running out the same way you would see it live and in action. It's a cool thing that they really nailed presentation wise.
So despite the fact that a lot of the modes and the features are kind of still what they were 15 years ago, the presentation is still top notch as always. And I was hearing that just the actual gameplay feels good too, which is always a plus.
Yeah, I enjoyed playing this football game more than I've enjoyed playing the last 4 or 5 Maddens. So,
oh God, tell me about it.
I'm still bad at all of them, but this one,
it's they come out on Game Pass, basically after the season's over, so you can get them for free but late. And so I've been doing that the last few years, and they all suck. They're so fucking bad. There's the superstar mode you can play. So I'm always trying to play a running back, and then halfway through I just lose all my attribute points for no reason, and there's just no way to recover them. And this has happened 3 years in a row now. And I don't get it. I literally don't think they look at the single player mode.
But because every football game needs to include the RPG elements, duh.
Talent trees and Ultimate Team. That's the new way of sports games for some fucking reason.
Yeah, but this game did really well sales-wise to the point where I think as of November sales data, and I couldn't get exact numbers despite trying, it has become the best-selling sports video game of all time.
That's crazy.
So there will definitely be more NCAAs in the future.
That's very interesting to me because you would think one of the PS2 FIFAs or something, PS3 FIFA may have been that game, but I guess never underestimate the passion of Americans in college football, right?
That's really what it is.
Moving on to PlayStation 5 Pro, which was released to mixed reception and a $700 price tag. Dude, I've barely touched my PS5 since I bought it. I ruined some kid's Christmas 3 years ago, and it's sat there as a Netflix device ever since. And the idea that we need a better one for $700 is just crazy. Maybe if you didn't have one yet, getting the better one is whatever. But the funniest part of this to me was that the scalpers all lost some money because there's just no demand.
Right. Well, the supply feels like it's good because they did sell relatively well. What I've heard is that it's sold pretty comparably to the PS4 Pro, at least in its early data. Mm-hmm. Will it continue to sell that well? I mean, who knows? I do know I have a friend who just went out and bought a PS5, and as he was looking into it, he's like, should I get the Pro? And as he looked into the comparisons of graphics, he was like, why would I spend an extra $300 for this? So even people coming into it for the first time are kind of is it really worth buying this for an extra $300?
Right.
Yeah, I assume sales are driven by what's the word I'm looking for? Low information consumers that just know they need to get the latest and greatest video game console. There are low information consumers that have more than enough discretionary income. That's why this is selling at all.
Yeah.
Bobby told his grandma he wanted a PS5. And that's all she knows.
And she's like, I see one. Here you go.
Yeah, I mean,
which I just can't imagine paying $700 for this thing. For what I've seen, and it isn't even a physical device. It has, it's a physical device, but it has no CD drive, so it can't play any physical media whatsoever. You have to buy an extra $80 disk drive if you want to play any physical media.
Which the more expensive of the PS5s lets you play the physical media, but it wasn't even $700 to start, right?
Right. It was $500. I think was the max price of the PS5.
I would be interested to know how many of these purchases are like exactly what you're saying, Jeff, versus like people who are actually upgrading. Like, are there actually crazy Sony fans that are like, oh yeah, just like I needed The Last of Us 2 updated 3 years after it came out, I need this PS5 Pro.
I mean, I can't imagine that. I mean, people spend more on iPhone upgrades every year, but like, I don't know, game console? Mm.
Moving on to the Fallout TV show. Now, I did not get around to watching this, but I believe both of you did, correct?
Yeah, yes. I had a lot of fun with it.
I loved it. It was probably... It won the Game Award this year, the Game Awards, for Best Adaptation. And I think it deserved it because as much as I like Arcane, I do think this season of Fallout was better than Season 2 of Arcane. I thought it was really cool. I thought there was a lot of really cool stuff in it. I think Ella Purnell as the lead did a really great job. And it just really captured the spirit of Fallout, which is a franchise that I don't even love. Like, I've played 3, I've played 4, and I've never been able to get more than a couple hours into either of them. But I just really liked the way they captured the tone and the like energy of the kind of goofy post-apocalypse.
Yeah, 100%. It felt like a very faithful representation of like what the video games were going for. I mean, I've never played more than a few hours of any Fallout game. I, of course, love the apocalyptic setting, but like Fallout is fundamentally like a farcical universe and storyline.
Right.
Like, it's all supposed to be absurdist and somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but then, you know, there are other moments that are very serious and are like very dark and high stakes and dramatic, and I just struggle with franchises that like want to do that sort of thing. But the Fallout show was a way for me to like get into that universe without having to sink 400 hours into another RPG, right? And it was very enjoyable. The whole thing was very entertaining, but definitely the war never changes line in the series it was just incredible. It was like perfectly timed in the show. It was so good. Watch it just for that moment.
It really is worth a watch. I mean, it's gotten over 100 million viewers as of October. I think they made an update on like Twitter or something that was like 100 million viewers. And it's like, I think their second most successful original show on Prime. So it's done really well.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, I had a good time with it. I still haven't watched Arcane, even though everyone keeps telling me to watch Arcane.
Watch Arcane.
Yeah, exactly. My wife has gotten into it, and she watched the Fallout show with me as well, and she is way more into Arcane, so clearly I have to carve out time to actually enjoy it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting how in the last couple of years we've gotten Arcane, we've gotten The Last of Us, we've gotten Fallout, we've also gotten like Halo, and and none of these games are really obsessed with following the plots directly. I mean, The Last of Us may be the closest that actually tries to follow like anything from an actual game, right? Mm-hmm. But so it's like every studio sort of realizes they don't need to do that, but I guess some are just way better at creating those original stories than the others, and others are Halo. So I don't know.
Ooh, yeah, Halo was bad, man. Halo was not good.
Yeah, the rumor I heard is that someone just like wanted to write a sci-fi story and got the chance to run the Halo show or whatever. So they just wrote their sci-fi story like in the Halo setting. That's the rumor I keep hearing, which is the only way I can make sense of the 2 episodes I watched. So.
I'm about to say it would track. I would say that the like first opening battle of the Halo show is pretty cool to watch, and then everything else.
It's so fucking cool.
Everything else of the Halo show is so the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it starts off exceptionally hype. I was like, this is incredible. And then the plot started to happen, and I was like, what is this?
Once they started speaking, it was like, oh no.
Oh no. Yeah. 100%.
It's definitely nice that we got these franchises that you don't need to know anything about the games to still thoroughly enjoy. Because Arcane is great, and if I ever had to enter the Summoner's Rift again, I'd kill myself.
I'm about to say, I've never played more than 5 minutes of League, and I love Arcane, so...
Yeah, I have like actual trauma associated with that game, so I'm just so, like...
we are in a pretty good like golden age of video game adaptations, despite having a couple of bad ones, like Halo. I think there are more good than bad coming out right now. Like Cyberpunk Edge Runners was really good. If you like anime bullshit like I do, it was awesome. So like there are, I think, more good than bad overall right now.
My respect for Austin went up 300% when he said he never played more than 5 minutes of League. Good job, man. Congratulations.
It is the proper amount of League I've not played, yeah.
I fucking hate I every time I tried to play League, I'm like, this is awful.
Yeah, that is the correct take.
I'd like to say it's gotten worse or something, but I don't think that's true. I think it's always been miserable. I think I've grown as a human is what happened.
Yeah, that's what it is. You've changed. They've stayed the same.
Anybody who likes League is just immediately shut off our podcast, but
That's okay. I don't want them here. They're going to get really mad at something stupid after 50 minutes. And then,
Maybe they'll take this moment for some self-reflection, right? So,
there we go.
If you still play League of Legends, look inside yourself. All right, so Marvel Rivals. So this game came out, 2 weeks ago now, Austin? Something like that?
Yeah, very recent. December 8th, I think.
This is very much a game that is looking to carry on the legacy of Overwatch 1, and it is making no real attempt to hide that. But it is absolutely crushing Overwatch 2's player count on Steam right now. Almost 10 times. What we got here? Almost 500,000 versus about 75,000. So not quite 10, but many times more. The funniest part of this to me is that, so we talked about Mike Ybarra in our last episode. He was one of the Blizzard co-presidents during the right before the Microsoft acquisition, right? Mm-hmm. And he put out a tweet that was just complaining about how NetEase and Tencent, all they do is rip off other games, and that even like Widowmaker and Black Widow have the same toolkit, yada, yada, yada. He deleted this pretty much immediately because everyone were like, yeah, dude, you're just mad that the company you just came from sucks. And that someone did their thing way better. It was also just something dumb, I thought, because it was like, it made it sound like he didn't realize Black Widow was a almost century-old comic book character. And he was like, oh, they copied something that was invented 8 years ago. It was a really weird tweet. But he was also a weird guy, as we found out from Play Nice. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, you're not going to win a debate on originality against, like, the Marvel Comics dude.
Right. So we've played it a little bit. Me and Austin have a couple friends of ours. We've played a little bit, too. I will say this. For being from NetEase, which is just... they have a slew of mobile games. Just dozens, right? The monetization, I guess it's like a battle pass in cosmetics, but I don't know because I don't even know where it is. Because the game absolutely does not shove it in your face. There's been no pop-ups about turning in your baby goat Tom Brady's for season 17 or whatever. Just none of this bullshit. Just like play now, and we get in a party, and we play, and it's amazing.
It's super fun. Like, minute-to-minute gameplay is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the battle passes are like Halo Infinite, to where they don't expire. Like, once you buy it, you have forever to actually earn all the rewards from it, which is definitely nice. I'm still not a fan of those kind of things, but ultimately, like I said, it's not very intrusive. The game is free, and it's fun as hell. So I've been super impressed with Marvel Rivals.
Yeah, it really is, like... all the things that people were complaining about Overwatch 2, like the way they implemented their battle pass, the way that they had cut back the roster from 6 to 5 at like one time, all of that stuff. Marvel Rivals is like, yeah, we're not gonna do any of that. We're gonna do what Overwatch 1 did, and like it's not the most balanced thing. It's not the most competitively, like, there's no role queue, so you can pick 5 DPS and 1 support if you want, but it doesn't matter because the games are quick. Matchmaking is almost instant. I mean, I've been very impressed with how quickly we find matches, and it's just a lot of fun to play.
We'll see if it maintains its player count for sure in the coming months, but off to a very strong start, and good for them. I want to move on now to what our personal favorite games of this year are. We all play a lot of games, as we kind of figured out from our Steam stats. I think I play the most degenerate amount.
Some of us play a lot of games.
I'm about to say, well, at least 2 of us play.
Jeff plays a lot of game, is what it is.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like 40% Total War or something.
Jeff just plays Total War a lot, and it's okay.
Yeah, my top 5 games for this year are just the only 5 things that count as released this year that I've played. So,
well, one of them like barely counts too, which is the best. But
I mean, you could argue several of these.
Yeah, it's an Age of Empires 2 expansion and Overwatch Classic. Like, we're really big in here. But,
we're just, like...
So, Austin, I'll go through first through mine, and then when I get to you, let's talk about the things we have overlap on.
I'm about to say, it's almost all of it, actually.
Yeah, so my favorite ended up being Tactical Breach Wizards. We did a whole episode on this, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, just like Final Fantasy when we get to it. But I loved every single thing about this game. The writing, the mechanics, the characters. I have zero complaints about this entire game through step 1 to the end, right? I actually got every single achievement in this game. I never do that. Achievements are the dumbest thing on the planet. I do not care about them. And for some reason, I was so compelled to finish this. Just an amazing game. Awesome, like, puzzle tactics kind of thing with just a really fresh take on every system and character. Huge recommendation there.
Adam, did you play Into the Breach?
I did a little bit. That was the FTL guys' like next project, right?
Yeah. It was like the roguelike, and you're on a little 2D grid, and you're in giant mechs fighting giant alien bugs.
Yeah.
I was wondering if Tactical Breach Wizards was like similar to that in the tactics and puzzle-like aspect.
A little bit, it's not a roguelike, but it does have some of the things where it's like thinking about the sequence of your turns and what comes next, and your positioning is all like super important. And you can kind of rewind as much as you want to the beginning of the last turn. So you can take a few steps, see how it plays out, and then realize like, okay, this was terrible, let me rewind. And it's all kind of like got a lore explanation because the main character can see 1 second into the future is what it is, which is kind of goofy, but it works well because you're constantly breaching rooms. So he's like, I can see what happens when we go through this door. And that's like the lore justification for why you can see through the walls and stuff. But no, it's got some of that where it's like the positioning and the sequence of the way your attacks and abilities play out over the round is like super important.
Oh man, this game sounds fucking awesome. Man,
it's like 3 British dudes did the whole thing.
And you should get it. It's really good.
The next one I have on my list, which is actually, Austin, your second one as well. These aren't really necessarily in order. I don't know, but Tactical was my top. So, Metaphor ReFantazio.
Let's go. I think it's Fantasio. It's a made up word anyway. Who cares?
It's just that dumb Japanese shit where they're like, let's just put a weird subtitle at the end of our game.
Like
it's like we're legally obligated.
This is definitely just supposed to be fantasy, but let's just make it weird.
They made it like Italian or something.
ReFantazio.
Yeah, Fantasio. But this from the Persona guys, right? Atlas.
Yeah.
And
same exact team as Persona 5, pretty much.
Yeah, and their whole thing was like, we want to kind of keep that system and that style of gameplay we have, but not do a bunch of kids in high school, which was like immediately intriguing to me because that is like such. I know it's silly, but it's such a stopper for me. Is like, oh, this is about kids in high school. I do not care. None of the other details matter at all. I don't care. But this is great because it's like this fantasy universe, and the whole sort of thing is like the king has been murdered, and this guy that's trying to take over the throne is suddenly stopped by like the ghostly reincarnation of the king, who's decided there should be like a popularity contest to assume the throne, aka like elections. And so it's about this world coming out of an oppressive monarchy. I don't know how oppressive it was. It's not really clear how good of a king the dead king was, but certainly a monarchy, into kind of figuring out how to start like a democracy or an elective monarchy at least. And that is kind of an interesting political backdrop to the mechanics that are present in Persona, which is normally about like hanging out with your friends after class or whatever. But now it's like we got to figure out all these people's like personal strifes, like a Mass Effect kind of loyalty mission type thing that occurs over the course of the game. And of course, there's the through plot of like you have to like go through all of these trials that the dead king has set up to determine who's the best, and you're gonna try to like make sure that these awful evil people who are trying to win are not going to be at the top. And it just ends up being a really interesting universe. It's a long ass game, as all of their games are. I'm like 55 hours in, and I still think I got another 15 or so at least.
I would say minimum 15, yeah.
Yeah. So you got to know what you're getting into. But I've been pleasantly surprised about a lot of it, especially with like how burned out I got through Persona 5 like halfway through. I've been way more into this, and IGN I think gave it their game of the year, and I feel like that's well deserved.
Yeah, I was impressed by how much time you put into Metaphor and how much you hadn't fallen off of it, because I knew what had happened with Persona 5. And I was like, I really hope this one sticks. And I really do think a big contributing factor to that is the gameplay addition to this one. That is the archetype system, which is essentially just like a job system.
You told me that there were like 30-something classes and that you could mix and match abilities from them, and I bought that shit like immediately.
You were like, all right, sounds good. And it's you can. It doesn't work out in the way that maybe a Final Fantasy job system does, but there's a lot of interesting combinations and things that you can do with a lot of these different classes and their abilities, and creating all these different like party lineups that you could go through the game completely different than I did. I think you probably have gone through it almost entirely different than I have.
Oh, yeah. You didn't put all of your points in luck?
No, because that's crazy. But yeah, it's just there's so much like gameplay depth to the turn-based combat. I think turn-based gets a bad rap outside of Atlas. Most people are like, ew, turn-based. But I think Metaphor does a lot of interesting things to make that turn-based kind of go speed, like very speedily. It's like each battle is fast. There's combat that happens in the overworld that I know you don't love, but like you can attack the enemies to weaken them in the overworld so that there's a little bit of action before you get into the turn-based, and I think that kind of helps the momentum of the game. So there's a lot of neat things that they do to kind of enhance the gameplay mechanics from Persona as well, and I think they really did find like a cool balance of what makes Persona special, but like here's some new things that we can do to kind of bring that series into the future, and I hope they take this stuff that they learned from Metaphor and bring it into Persona 6.
They've taken what has kind of become a very stale genre, the JRPG, and really managed to make it fresh without abandoning it. Because a lot of Japanese RPGs now are just like, we're done with a turn-based thing entirely, right? We're going to go for something else, which is totally fine. Like, this is what, Final Fantasy VII ReBirth did. But Atlas has been like, no. We want to kind of stick to the roots of that turn-based Final Fantasy style, but make it something interesting. And I think they've done a pretty good job with that. And unlike Tactical Breach Wizards, Jeff, don't buy this one. You'll hate it. But
you will never finish. It's okay.
I mean, so a lot of what you're talking about with the class variety and the depth of combinations of things reminds me of other games I've played that I've always missed an in-depth class system from. But you're right, I don't play JRPGs. So.
Yeah, you're not missing much most of the time. But
the story is really cool though. Like, there's a lot of really cool things about it for sure. That I think you would also appreciate, Jeff. But at the same time, don't buy it. Just like maybe watch a highlight reel of the story and call it a day.
That's fair.
So we'll move on now to Final Fantasy VII ReBirth, which again we did an episode on, so I won't talk too much about it. I almost feel like this one got a little overshadowed just for it being early in the year, and you had AstroBot come out in the end, you had Metaphor come out toward the end. Because it only picked up best like music score at the Game Awards or something.
Yeah, I think it picked up best audio and music.
I can't even pretend that I didn't check my save file, which I should have, because I'm pretty sure it's like 130 something. But it's a lot of hours that I put into this game, and I did thoroughly enjoy it. I know a lot of people have complained about what they've done to the original story, and I understand that because I think it's a little harder to follow what's going on. But my God, did I enjoy this game system so much that I did not care. I mean, after a certain point, I don't even know what was happening around me anyway. I was just enjoying all of the mechanics of it. And I think by the time you get to the end, it at least left on something like both cliffhangery and satisfying enough to where I was intrigued for the next one that'll come out 6 years from now. But yeah, really great game. I think definitely in that Game of the Year conversation.
Yeah, I really loved ReBirth. It's my personal game of the year, I think. It would be my top spot. I love it's not the most faithful, like, in the broad story, but in the, like, story beats, in the moments, there's so much, like, familiarity, and there's this, like, scene with the dolphin or whatever, where you're, like, doing a dolphin jump to get to a higher platform. Like, this is absolutely absurd. There's no way this is in the original game. And I looked it up, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess I forgot that was a thing that happened in the original 7. Like,
I ended up going through and playing the original for like 10, 12 hours, and I was surprised constantly, like, oh, this goofy-ass thing actually was in the original. I just totally forgot about it. And they do expand it, like you said, right? Originally, it's like, you're just trying to get this dolphin to launch you up onto this platform so you can sneak into this facility. And then in ReBirth, it's like Wave Race 64 on the back of a dolphin. So they really turned everything up to 11. But I did appreciate how they took a lot of those original things and expanded on them instead of just leaving them out, right?
Yeah, personally, I love the story. I mean, we talked about all of this stuff in our previous episode, so I don't want to go too deep into it, but I thought it was amazing. It's my personal game of the year, and if you haven't played ReBirth and you have any, like, love of Final Fantasy VII at all, go play Remake, go play ReBirth, and just experience it for yourself. Don't let people saying, like, oh, the story's weird and da-da-da. Like, just try it yourself and see, because I personally love the stuff that they're doing with the story. I think there's a lot of really interesting moments and things that they're elaborating on, and they're kind of trying to bring all of the expanded Final Fantasy VII lore together. And will it pay off? Who's to say? But I think it's a cool thing to try, and I think you should try it for yourself and see.
And go listen to the FF7 ReBirth episode, y'all.
Let's go.
Jeff with the plugs. Love it.
Plug.
The next game I want to talk about is actually the one game that's on all three of our lists, and I think that is real testament to just how fucking good it is. And that is Helldivers 2.
Oh
Let's
my
go.
God.
Let's go.
Which took the world by storm in like January, February, and it's had like a little up and down here and there, but for the most part, it's still doing really, really well, and props to them.
It is the coolest fucking game I've played in a long time. I mean, just doing the combat solo, like you can load into this game and play its mission solo if you're really that desperate. I recommend throwing the SOS beacon and just getting randos. That's how much fun it is. But just loading in solo is a ton of fun because never before has a game personified the concept of like, oh, there are enemies in that direction. Roger. Now removing that direction, it's just so much fun to throw an incredible level of ordnance in this game. And I think it's the first thing in a long time that I've seen as a true phenomenon, at least in the PC gaming community. I think a lot of us have a Steam's friends list that is relatively outdated, right? It's kind of long. Maybe you don't game with those folks anymore. I've never seen 12 people online simultaneously playing the same game before. Not in like 15 years.
And I really do think that's a testament to how fun this game is to play with friends. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, like you said, you could play it solo for the goofy, for the goofiness of it. But playing this game with friends is maybe even more goofy. Like, every time we play, there's guaranteed 2 to 3 team kills by just giant bombs like dropping on your head because you called in an airstrike and you were like, surely this will be out of the range of my team, and one of your teammates just dives into the way and is exploded.
The first time I ever got team killed in Helldivers, it was because I called in a reinforcement. My buddy died. I called him back in. Where did his drop pod land? On top of my head. It was infuriating and also the funniest shit I have experienced online in so long.
And I think that's such the joy of it, is that like even when you're getting team killed, even when you're dying in stupid ways, the ragdolling, the like over the top like like Wilhelm screams and
Yes.
things, like it's just, it all comes together to form a package. Like even when you're constantly dying, it doesn't matter. It's still so much fun, and it's a game that personifies fun, I think, more than most other games in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree, and I feel like people are going to pick us apart, or at least pick me apart. I think it's one of the most polished experiences that I've played in years. And people are going to be like, oh no, if you like stand 2 meters out of range and watch the enemies or whatever, like, they won't notice you. Or like, oh, I had these spawn in the wrong place or whatever. What are you talking about polished? And I was like, y'all, you do not understand like the level of mechanics and complexity of this game that are all coming together. Just the shaky cam, like when you call in an airstrike and that bomb hits the ground, like your point of view, like, rumbles or whatever, right? Like that camera is just so well done to give you a real visceral feeling of like you're actually on some garbage alien planet fighting for managed democracy. It's just incredible.
The little quips are so great too. Just all the little
freedom,
nice cup of liberty, and just all of this stuff.
Democracy fills my sample container. There we go.
Yeah, just it adds so much flavor to it, and it's so goofy, and it really straddles that line between being like, I mean, it's obviously a parody, but it just has moments that feel epic and serious because of just like the scale of everything and the menacing nature of some of the enemies. Yeah, it's perfect. It's one of these games that, like you said, you can just go in, get matched with 3 random people, and no one even really complains when they get team killed. Like if you lose the mission, people will rage quit and bitch, but for the most part, like dying to your teammates is just part of this game, and especially when you don't know the difference between the like orbital strike and the like 550 area strike, and those things are huge, and yeah.
I have a personal vendetta against folks who call in the mortar sentry when we're playing Bug Planets, but like that's fine. It's still fun.
It's all part of it though, and that's what makes the game so much fun. Is that like you can take a level 9. I mean, I still remember our video clip of like my level 17 ass like saving us from a suicide mission on level 9 or whatever it was. Like, just the most ridiculous, like, you could take anybody at any level, at any skill level, and still have a good time with it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, honestly, you're missing out on half the fun if you don't just dive into some of the higher level missions sometimes. Like, it is incredibly funny to, like, you know, maybe you're grinding out a few level 4 campaigns or something, to then just, you know, like, jump into a level 8 and see the absolute cartoonish absurdity that is, like, you run across one patrol and then suddenly, like, the Autobots or whatever are dropping 3 tanks on your head. It's so much fun this is the only game I've played where you can be like a single little dude and you can actually nuke them from orbit. And they have just done that so well. It's never going to get old. Anyway.
The silliness of every single soldier having their own, like, capital ship.
Yes.
It's just so dumb, but also just amazing at the same time.
And the fact that, like, every time you die, like, there's a lore reason that they're just sending a new person in and that your body's just, like, staying there. Like,
Austin,
like,
I can't stop thinking about that detail. Like, the fact that they randomize, like, the default setting is to randomize your voice track or whatever, right? So every Helldiver you bring in is obviously different from the last one, and that's so good. Like, they're very specifically being like, yeah, you died. That dude is dead forever. So.
Right, and it doesn't matter. Here's a new one.
Yep.
So I guess really what it is, it's not like every soldier has their own capital ship. It's that, like, every soldier is basically a torpedo. They're thought of the same way. It's like you have all these capital ships with, like, you know, missiles and torpedoes and soldiers that just get launched like any bomb would. It's amazing.
Ironically, yes, you nailed it on the head, Adam. It's so good, y'all. It's so good.
If you haven't played it, I think, what are you doing? Just go try it out. It's got to be like, I mean, it's probably not super cheap because it's doing so well, but it's probably not full price anymore, right?
I don't think I've spent a single dollar on it. Was there original? Oh, sorry, you do have to buy a copy of it, right?
Yeah.
But it was like $40 too. Like, it wasn't a $60 game, I believe.
Yeah. I didn't spend any money on it because I made Connor buy it for me because I didn't want to play it. I was wrong. Like, I was wrong. It is awesome, but I was like, I don't need Helldivers 2. It's fine.
Remember what you just said when I tried to get you to play some of these other games. You were wrong. And,
no, you've already said you're not spending any money this year, so we're fine.
Remind me to send Connor $40 on your behalf.
I'm going to move on now to the last game on my list this year, which I actually only picked up like a week ago, but I've already got like 20 hours in it. I've only played games for 2 days this week. It's called SteamWorld Heist 2. Now, the SteamWorld franchise has a bunch of little games in it. I haven't really played any of the other ones. But what this one sort of ends up being is like almost like a 2D XCOM where the emphasis is on bouncing your shots off of walls and stuff. So, there's a few different classes. You'll get into a mission. You have like 3 party members, and you kind of move turn-based around the map. But the idea is that, like, okay, you have this sniper rifle. Well, these bullets bounce. So there's this guy behind cover that you can't hit, but you can bounce it 4 times off the wall and hit him right in the back of the head. And that's kind of one of the core mechanics. And it is so fucking satisfying when you get it lined up perfect. Because, like, there's abilities that will kind of extend a little line out of your gun so you can see where it's going to bounce. But by default, you kind of have to eyeball it. And when you just like perfectly get a 5 bounce sniper shot to the back of someone's head, oh man, it's so great. Just on that alone is why this is one of my top 5 games, because it's just truly fantastic. And then, you've got enough RPG elements to keep me interesting with some equipment, and like the classes are based on the weapon that you've equipped, so you can very easily switch your characters between different classes. But as they level up, they get to keep a couple of abilities, kind of like Metaphor, from the classes that they've already leveled up, so you can kind of mix and match those too. As I've made obvious, if I can mix and match like classes and skills, I'll play your game. So I've loved this. Huge recommendation for anyone that likes tactical stuff to pick up SteamWorld Heist 2.
I need you to pitch a bouncing bullet sniper rifle to the Helldivers 2 team. Thank you.
I wish sniping was just a little more viable in Helldivers 2, period. But I feel like you can't get yourself in a position to where you're not just going to immediately get swarmed from behind.
Yeah.
I've never even attempted to snipe in Helldivers, and it's probably for the best, I feel like.
If it's not a shotgun, I'm not wielding it in Helldivers. So. All right, Austin, why don't we look at just one game on your list we haven't talked about yet, and that's AstroBot, which took home many Game of the Year awards, surprisingly. It kind of came out of nowhere at the end of the year, and, it may have been hyped, but it came out very late in the year and stole a lot of thunder.
Yeah, so AstroBot is very much like, what if PlayStation did Mario?
Whoa.
But, like, what if PlayStation did Mario really, really well? And that's what AstroBot is. Because it is probably the best 3D platformer since Super Mario Odyssey. And if you're not a 3D platformer fan, like, this probably isn't going to change your mind. Like, I know, Adam, you're not the biggest 3D platformer fan, so I wouldn't be like, oh...
I played Mario 64, so I see no reason to ever play another one again.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, too.
And honestly, like, that's fair. I understand it. But if you like 3D platformers and you like PlayStation, then AstroBot really is a glorified ad for PlayStation, but it does it so well that you don't really care, because part of the gimmick of AstroBot, right, is like, you're in this spaceship, which is just a PlayStation 5. The spaceship is just a PlayStation 5. and it crash lands on a planet and, like, breaks apart. And the parts, like, scatter out to different planets. I guess it, like, breaks in space or whatever. Or no, an alien, like, steals all the parts and brings them to different planets. So you're, like, following the parts for the spaceship, which are all just, like, the motherboard, the hard drive, the RAM. Like, it's the parts of the PlayStation that you're collecting. And each area has bots that you're like acquiring, that your collectibles, or like the little astrobots that were traveling in the spaceship with you. They've also kind of scattered out to these planets, and you're rescuing them, and they're all like PlayStation characters, like Jak and Daxter and Kratos, and all these other characters, Nathan Drake, and there's a bunch of levels that are actually like just homages to PlayStation games. Like, there's like an Uncharted level where it's like a like cover shooter almost, and you're like you're basically playing an AstroBot version of Uncharted. And same thing with God of War. There's one where you get like an axe and you can throw the axe just like your Kratos in the new God of War games. Like, there's so much love and respect for PlayStation properties, and the attention to detail. And just, again, I was talking about Helldivers 2 being one of the most like fun games. AstroBot's another one that is just like, this is just fun. It's joyful. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna smile. It's just a really fun, solid 3D platformer.
I'm always so skeptical of like mixing IPs and crossovers and stuff, but by all accounts, this is just done in such a like interesting way, because like you said, they're leaning into the IPs in order to create levels that like kind of resemble some of the mechanics from those games and are very much like homage to those properties. And it's like, I don't know if tasteful is the right word, but it's definitely not like cash grabby distraction. It's it's like intentional.
Right. It's definitely done with a lot of love and respect for those properties, and it isn't done like just to none of this stuff really feels like it's being sold with that in mind. Like, the marketing and stuff isn't like, oh, look at all the PlayStation characters. It's like, no, just look at this fun 3D platformer. And it is. It's just a lot of fun. It's the right amount of challenging. The music is great. Like, it hits all the notes that you would want a 3D platformer to hit, and it's up there with some of Nintendo's best work in the 3D platformer space. And if that's not a glowing endorsement, right, then 3D platformers just aren't for you.
Well, before we move on to looking ahead this year, let's get to the 4 other games Jeff played.
That's right.
Other than Helldivers, yeah.
So see, one of them, Star Wars Outlaws, which we've talked about, but anything you want to say about that?
Oh, yeah. So while my list is composed of exactly the 5 new things I've played this year, Star Wars Outlaws was genuinely fun, something I really enjoyed. And they just came out with their coolest update, which is now you can carry around the picked up weapons like longer and potentially on your speeder.
Oh, that's cool.
So I might have to go, Vietnam on some stormtroopers again. So maybe Ubisoft will get a full price game out of me. But question for you, Adam. I saw Ubisoft on the list of people doing layoffs. Do you think the Star Wars Outlaws team got canned as part of that?
I don't know for sure, because like Ubisoft has so many subsidiaries, right? And I don't know exactly which one was working on this, but they're usually pretty good about just moving people around. So this may have been more of like a few people from various teams as opposed to like the whole Outlaws team got canned. But it's hard to say.
Yeah, that said, I'm not really hopeful for a sequel, which is what this game really needs. Go listen to the Star Wars Outlaws episode, y'all. But, I would love a Star Wars Outlaws 2, but I'm pretty certain I'm not going to get it. moving on from there, let me talk about the other actual new game I played this year, which is Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. If you go look at my Steam stats, Warhammer 40k it's literally its own category, my little pentagram of genres that I play, apparently. And Space Marine 2 was fun if you can get two friends to play it with you. I think, trio campaigns are an interesting thing that seems to be becoming more and more common out there. Maybe we'll talk about that Elden Ring thing later sometime. But it's a competent game that was well put together. That's very fun if you're into the Warhammer 40k lore, although it's not really anything to write home about. But I definitely had a good time, slaying lots and lots of Tyranids. If you ever played StarCraft and you want to just fight the Zerg, go play Space Marine 2.
I had a great time with it. Me, Austin, and Connor played the campaign, but I honestly did not find the endless co-op mode as engaging as I thought I would. Mm-hmm. It kind of just made me want to go play Helldivers and stuff. But the campaign was great. I mean,
yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked that the campaign was pretty short. It was simple. It was short, sweet. I enjoyed it. I don't necessarily feel the need to go back to it, but I really did enjoy what I played of it.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, the first Space Marine was just all about the campaign. There was no multiplayer. And they added multiplayer and a PvP mode to this one, which was just never going to become that much of a thing. We played the PvP for a little while. It was not that much fun. And then, talk about a bad year for Space Marine 2 to come out. Helldivers 2 is just everything that is fun about Space Marine 2 and so much more.
Mm-hmm. But by all accounts, this game made a ton of money because its production costs were kept very reasonable, and then it sold very well. So good for them. I think it was less than 50 million or something, which
is awesome.
Shouldn't be wow, that's not much money at all. But just compared to some of these other games,
I'm about to say, considering Concord was 400 million, then
On one hand, it does feel like a very efficiently made game, right? The levels aren't super expansive. You're kind of on rails and stuff, but I don't know, the model detail was very impressive, and the way enemies would swarm on top of you, and oh man, it's really interesting in that game how you can go from tearing through Tyranid swarms and cutting down these warriors, and then sometimes one's just gets the best of you. There are times where I'll turn a corner and be trying to 1v1 a warrior, which I've done several times before, and he just fucks me up because I'm off my game that time. And so I always appreciate it when games like that can make that experience fun, even though at the end of the day I'm really stomping the same creatures over and over again, right? Anyway,
well, let's go back to 1999 because I'm super intrigued to hear you talk about this Age of Empires 2 expansion, Battle for Greece.
Yeah, so the last two things on my list, I kind of have the same argument for, which is I really appreciate companies that keep IPs alive, or even not really IPs alive, who keep specific games alive by continuing to innovate within that same game engine, right? Part of the games industry that's always been a bit strange to me is how much effort and production will go into different titles, and then they just kind of evaporate. Sometimes folks expect whole new engines if you have a new entry in the franchise. And Age of Empires 2 is just the exact opposite of that, right? This is the same game from 1998 or whatever, but they released the definitive edition about 5 years ago, and they've been releasing new DLC content ever since. This is a great story of a bunch of fan-made mods becoming professional developers for the franchise, and them continuing to churn out new content. And their latest expansion, Battle for Greece, is super interesting because they've taken the base game and the base engine and they've added a ton of new mechanics for it. Age of Empires has stayed alive because of the online multiplayer scene, but what they've been doing with recent expansions is expanding out into different historical eras and really playing with the mechanics. It's still an RTS game, but they've changed a lot of the fundamentals, and there are whole new civilizations in this expansion that you can't play on the typical multiplayer ladder because they're just so different. They're not remotely balanced for it. And so as they've been releasing these expansions, it's almost sub games within a game. It reminds me a lot of the proper expansions that people used to release in the 90s and 2000s, except you can keep playing the regular base game. So basically, at this point, I have 3 separate Age of Empire themes video games that are like all in the same kind of world. And it's just a lot of fun to try out. And I really appreciate seeing a team and a game that is like this long term continue to innovate and change things and take risks. And I think it'll actually pay off for them. Like, they are making enough money to sustain this team and even expand it. But that's my spiel for Age of Empires 2. Did you guys want to jump in on my bandwagon?
Dude, I've been telling Austin I'm trying not to spend any money on Steam in the year 2025, and all it's making happen is me make a giant list that I'm going to buy in the next 9 days. I guess this is going on it. That just sounds so cool, because I really enjoyed a lot of like StarCraft 2 and Warcraft 3 campaign missions that put in like unique mechanics and whatever for those missions or those campaigns. So getting that in Age of Empires just sounds so up my alley. I'm definitely going to have to check this out.
Yeah. It's just a whole different era, right? Like, Age of Empires is about the Middle Ages. This is taking us back to the Bronze Era Mediterranean. Yeah. So if you're a history nerd, don't buy Total War Pharaohs or whatever. Just go play Age of Empires again. So.
Nice. Did you have to say don't buy Total War something?
Look, the historical...
What's going on? What's happening right now?
The historical arm of that franchise is having a tough time. There's a reason 40% of my playtime is in Total War Rome Remastered and not their latest historical title.
That's fair.
Anyway, so the last thing I put on my list, and this is the biggest stretch, was Overwatch Classic, which we played together for a little bit. It is
I'll accept it.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And it's I'm trying not just to celebrate Overwatch Classic, but the fact that there are a lot of live service games like Fortnite, like World of Warcraft, if you want to call that live service, right? But a lot of subscription-based games that are releasing how they used to be. Like, once your game is successful enough and is run long enough, right? Like, you make so many changes that the game you're playing today is vastly different for what people got hooked on. And it makes a lot of sense, and I find it super interesting that so many of these games are relaunching what they released at launch day to bring players back to the game. And, I totally skipped Overwatch, so getting to play Overwatch Classic within Overwatch 2 with you guys was a lot of fun. Now I understand Widowmaker. What did you guys think of the Overwatch Classic adventure we had?
No, I thought Overwatch Classic was a lot of fun. I think going back to those early days of Overwatch, the memories that I had of Overwatch was a lot of fun. I think it didn't last as long as I wanted it to for me. Like, I didn't have the desire to keep going back to it like I was hoping I would. But it was cool to just like relive those memories and now like seeing that in Marvel Rivals, right? Like, having just played Overwatch Classic and then jumping into Marvel Rivals and seeing all the things that felt instantly familiar in Marvel Rivals was like, people want this OG experience, whether it be Overwatch or Fortnite or, Warcraft, like you said, like any of these original experiences, people are craving what they remember it to be. And it's always just so funny to me when it's like, oh, you don't really want that. But it's like, no, we do.
We do.
Like,
you think you do, but you don't, you might?
Yeah, if, you might say. So yeah, no, I really liked Overwatch Classic. I'm glad we did it, and I hope more games keep doing the. I think people who are like down on remasters and think that idea is stupid is like, guys, you want like just enjoy the old thing again. Like, let your nostalgia take over. It's okay.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm super interested to see if we're gonna have a bunch of companies that are actually running like 3 or 4 versions of their game at a time, if that's sustainable or, if that works at all. But I'm super curious to see how it works out.
Yeah, so that rounds up our top 5. Just to repeat, Austin's was Final Fantasy VII, your top one?
Yep.
And then Tactical Breach Wizards for me, and Helldivers 2 for Jeff.
100%.
All awesome games.
Yeah, games I've played, all games that are on my top 5 as well. So, like, great games all around. I do think there's a couple other releases that came out this year that are notable to mention real quick. I don't want to spend really any time on them.
Yeah, sure.
Other than just like acknowledging that they came out. Black Myth Wukong was a big game this year that I think had a lot of controversy just because of there was this idea that it was like anti-woke, which we've talked about in the past with like Outlaws and stuff. And yes. I hate it. I hate the conversation around Black Myth. That game could be great. I never touched it. It could be awesome. but I don't want to touch it just because of the people who play it, which is unfair to that game. But God, all the controversy around that game drives me crazy.
But it seems like it was people that are fans of Souls-like games and hate woke shit were mostly talking about it, which is just a combination that I think puts all of us off.
Yeah, it's just immediately something where I'm like, God, I don't want to touch that at all.
Yeah, we were
Again, not to say maybe you shouldn't check it out. I don't know, but
talk about people who need self-reflection, right? So,
oh yes,
it just has me sitting here thinking, like,
bird.
do I hate League of Legends or do I hate the people who play League of Legends? Anyway,
that's really the only one that I have anything negative to say about, though, because Balatro came out this year, which swept basically every indie category at the Game Awards, and anybody who's even talking about video games is like, Balatro. Which I've played probably like 35-ish hours of Balatro this year now, combined between mobile and PC, and I love it. It's so fun.
I know that. Where is Peggy? Is that Australia? The rating system? It's like
I think that's the European.
Okay,
like I think that's like the UK.
So apparently, Peggy refuses to not make it an 18-rated game because it's got, quote, gambling in it. But it's fucking crazy to me because it's so far removed from what actual poker is. And I get this total kick of just imagining some Zoomer going to a casino and waiting for, like, the jokers to come out. So he can power up his deck. And it's just so ridiculous, especially when some of these games sell literal fucking loot boxes.
yeah.
So that really sucks for that guy because he's missing out on a lot of money from Europe because of that. But he's also made a shitload, and it's a great game. So, like, props to him.
And it's literally one developer, one guy who did the whole thing, and it's so cool. If you haven't played Balatro, go play Balatro. It's so good. It's on mobile for like $10, and it's like the perfect mobile game. It's just so easy to pick up and play. So go play Balatro.
Any game you can buy on the App Store that does not say in-app purchases underneath just gets like an instant recommendation from me. So,
Hades 2 came out this year. I know you played a ton of Hades 2. I played a decent bit of Hades 2. I didn't play as much as I wanted to play, but it's just Hades, but better, arguably.
It's following what they did with the first game, where they are releasing in an early access thing. But it is, of course, like a very, very polished experience, and they're using feedback to build kind of the tail end of it. It's not like early access because they got, some polygons and an engine, and now they want to, make money. Yeah, there's something about it that I don't quite like as much as the first game, I have to say. But it is still very good, and there's a lot of cool systems and a lot of cool attacks and stuff. And I think by the time they get it fully out, I'll probably enjoy it as much as the first one because they've already added some things I've enjoyed. But Hades 2, good time.
Indiana Jones and the Great Circle released way late this year, like December 9th or something like that. So it like wasn't eligible for the Game Awards show. There was like a lot of things that it missed out on, I think, by releasing so late. But I've been playing it the last couple of days, and it is a lot of fun. And I'm not even really a big Indiana Jones fan, but I've really enjoyed it. It's by the Wolfenstein guys, Machine Games.
Ooh.
And it's just a lot of fun to play as Indiana Jones. I think Troy Baker does an excellent job as like the voice actor and kind of motion cap and everything for Indiana. And great game. I'd pick it up. It's on Game Pass, so if you have Game Pass, just go play it on that because that's what I've been doing, and it's really cool. Jeff, do you like Indiana Jones? Go play this game.
Cool. I can get behind that.
Also, Life is Strange Double Exposure came out this year, which was a big one for me because I love Life is Strange. And this is the first game to feature Max, the original protagonist from the original game. She comes back to kind of reprise the leading role. And it was an interesting game. I liked it. I beat it. The way it ends kind of leaves me questioning the future of the series a little bit. But if you like Life is Strange, it's worth it just to like see Max back.
Well, yeah, because every subsequent entry after the first one sold less than the first one, right? So it was
yes.
really, and none of them featured Max. So it was really only a matter of time before they finally brought her back, right? Like this doesn't surprise me at all.
And I don't know how well this game did. I don't know if it did like sales-wise really well. Critically, it was kind of mixed reception-wise. But I liked it enough. It definitely didn't make my top 5, clearly. But it could maybe make my top 10 potentially. Who knows?
The next game on your list here, I'm just surprised I can pronounce it, because normally the series of games has just utter nonsense after the word Dragon Ball.
Yeah, okay. So Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is an important moment for Dragon Ball fans. Thank you, Adam. You can stop hating.
Apparently there's a difference between all the other 13 games released since Budokai, but
there is. Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi is the kind of 3D arena fighter that Dragon Ball last put out, I think, in 2007, and this is considered the true sequel to Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3. Yes, that is a ridiculous name. You're right. But Dragon Ball Sparking Zero kind of brings those same mechanics back with a roster of 180 characters. And it goes through multiple stories like Z, Super. It goes through so much of the Dragon Ball story. The online was really active for a long time. People really flocked to this game. I loved what I played of it. I haven't put as much time into it as I will. I will surely go back to it some more. But it's just it's one of those games that really captures the spirit of Dragon Ball, and you should definitely play it if you're at all a Dragon Ball fan, which does not apply to you, Adam. I don't know about you, Jeff. How do you feel about Dragon Ball?
Oh my god, I need you to answer one very important question for me. Can I play as Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta and beat the shit out of these blue-haired freaks from Dragon Ball Super? If I can do that.
Yes, you can.
All right. Adding to cart.
Jeff, instant sold. It's a great game that celebrates the legacy of Dragon Ball from Z to Super, and even with some GT love in there too. So
thank God.
If you're one of the 5 people that like GT,
yeah, I'll take that mantle.
Did Super just override GT story wise?
GT was not done by the same writer. It was a sequel commissioned by the anime studio or whatever. And Austin can correct me where I'm wrong here. So it was just a totally different plot than what I think Toriyama would have done, and then they had him do Super. So it's just GT is non-canon in the way the Star Wars Expanded Universe is non-canon.
Okay.
Correct. Technically speaking, Super takes place immediately after Z. Mm-hmm. So, or after Kid Buu dies, because technically Z ends way in the future, but whatever. The point being, GT picks up years after Kid Buu dies, but Super picks up immediately after. So technically they could canonize GT at some point if they wanted to, but they won't.
Yeah, they won't, and that would be super janky and broken anyway.
There's a new Dragon Ball series that's actually on right now that I've been really enjoying, which is supposed to have DLC. This game is supposed to have DLC from that new series, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes.
There's a new series. I thought Super ended with the parallel gods of creation or something being Goku's friend. Sorry, spoilers, y'all.
You're not entirely wrong.
That's the most Dragon Ball fucking thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, Adam, if you thought Dragon Ball Z had broken power level scaling, Dragon Ball Super is just exponential growth personified.
Yeah, here's literal gods.
This new series actually takes place, somehow they squeeze time in between the end of Kid Buu and before Battle of Gods. So that little tiny sliver of time, that's when this one takes place.
Oh, I thought you were about to say they squeeze time into a marble, and so Goku has to go.
No, it wouldn't be surprising, but no, this is not a Dragon Ball podcast though. I can turn it into one, but it's not.
Next episode.
Now, the last game I wanted to mention was just Infinity Nikki, which came out a week ago. It's a mobile game from the Nikki series, which is a pretty popular Japanese mobile franchise. But this one is what is being described as a open world dress up game. So all the gacha mechanics, all the microtransaction stuff is all based around getting new outfits and dresses and stuff for your main character. But this game has catapulted in popularity from people. Like I've seen Infinity Nikki stuff everywhere. People are like, "Oh my god, like Infinity Nikki." I've only played a few minutes of it myself, and I've enjoyed what I played. But it's just been interesting to see the blow up of this game.
I did not actually know it was a mobile game because so my fiance's been playing it on PlayStation, and it it doesn't necessarily look amazing, but it looks pretty well done. I legitimately thought it was like a AAA game that was single player and free to play, which I've just never heard of. But yeah, there obviously are a lot of microtransactions in it and stuff. But it seems interesting. It kind of seems like a little bit of a like puzzle platformer, like 3D platformer. I was watching her do some puzzles, and your different abilities change you into your different outfits give you different abilities. So you'll like instantly change, and that's how you can hover. That's how you can shoot a fireball or whatever the hell, right?
Right.
It is interesting. There's like a ton of dialogue in it. It is incredibly high production for a free to play game, and maybe that's just because of like the free to play nonsense I'm used to, which is just the worst of the worst. It does seem like some of these East Asian studios now are coming up with these really high polished like free to play games.
Yeah, it's definitely in the same vein as something like Genshin Impact or like Zenless Zone Zero or Honkai Star Rail. Like a lot of what those studios are doing, those Asian Japanese companies are taking and just like making big elaborate games and getting all of their money from people just like buying a bunch of what are essentially loot boxes. Like. And that's how they're making all their money. But they're really high production value and pretty cool games. So I just can never get too deep into them because I just don't have the time to put like. There's too many games that I play. These are like play this one game for 6 months type of games, and I can never get into those.
Well, some of these publishers out of Korea and China, I think have just really figured out like the free to play system, and so they have no problem investing a like AAA amount of money into that because they know they're going to get it back.
Yeah, and they all do.
Yeah, so it's not like one of these things where someone tries to make as cheap as possible to put on the App Store. It's really the opposite approach. But I think that polish really helps suck people into the game, and then they spend way more than $60 on dresses, and that's the business model. But
That's really all I have as far as games that release. I mean, we missed maybe a couple here and there, but that to me is the biggest releases of the year when you combine our top 5 with those other ones that I mentioned. Like those are kind of the biggest games of the year. I think I put in 615 hours into games approximately this year when I tallied up all of my like rap stuff. So I've played a lot of games this year.
I don't think I ended up with a total number that I found, and maybe that was just like subconsciously I didn't want to.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
Yeah, so for the last few minutes here, we'll talk about my favorite thing, which is myself. And
no shit.
I want to talk about just 3 of us, this podcast, our gaming habits a little bit this year. Like I said, we've been doing this for over a year now, which is awesome. Thank you guys for being by my side here as we have figured this out. Thank you to our listeners. Yeah, so if you guys didn't know, Steam does a recap that is similar to like a Spotify Wrapped or whatever the hell. And now I think everything's doing it, right? Like you can get it on Game Pass and PlayStation Network.
Video games, music, YouTube, fast food restaurants, they all do it now.
Literally everything. Yeah. I got one for Crunchyroll the other day, the like anime streaming app. I was like, yeah, all right. Sure.
I played, so the calculation is a little interesting on Steam because I think it's including demos, and whenever Steam Next Fest happens, I just download everything under the sun. So some of that is that, but it says I played 94 games, only 39 were demos, so I guess it's still like a lot of not demo games. 62 considered new to me, not necessarily new releases, but things I hadn't played before. So you can tell what I like every time there's a sale in a game that's even got remotely moderate reviews. If it's under $10, I'm like, nah, play it for 90 minutes and never touch it again. But that's an experience, right? 621 achievements unlocked. Achievements are so stupid. This means nothing. If you I never try to seek out achievements, right? Other than Tactical Breach Wizards this year, it's like the one exception, and I still have 600 of them. What does it mean if you can stumble aimlessly into 600 of them?
No,
utterly meaningless.
I agree with you, but the achievements that are fun are the ones you get for doing like atypical things. That's what I like to see in games. I feel like Jedi Survivor had a few of those, but
There's one in Helldivers 2 that me and my friend Chris got that was like, you go through a whole mission of at least 5 difficulty without using support or primary weapons. So just stratagems in your pistol.
That's
we managed to get that by basically disabling matchmaking, but you can't just trust a stranger. You can't just be like, hey, we're not using our guns this mission. Like that would work.
They'd be like, yeah, okay, sure, you have fun with that, guys.
But speaking of that, 15% of my total playtime this year was Helldivers 2, which is easily the most of any game I've played. It's really just a testament to, I was looking at the chart on the Steam thing, and I booted it up every single month this year, which is crazy because there's no game I've played in a long time where that's the case. And I think it's just a real testament to how damn good that game is. Austin, tell me about your degeneracy a little bit.
I did not have nearly as much degeneracy in Steam specifically. I played 26 games in Steam. 78% of mine were new releases. I pretty much only played new things. It's kind of a problem. 18% of my total playtime was in Helldivers 2, so I win. You had more hours in Helldivers 2 than I did still, but,
Yeah.
I just don't play as much. It's fine.
You play on things that aren't Steam. I get it. Yeah,
I did play another 13 games on PS5 and another 23 games on Xbox, and I think like 5 or 6 on my Switch too. So like our numbers aren't all that different when you combine them all together. And like I said, I had a total of around 615 or so hours in games, give or take a few. I think the game I put the most time into this year was Metaphor. I put 93 hours into Metaphor and 88 into REbirth. So that sounds right. Both of those games are incredibly long games.
How did I do 130 in REbirth and you only did 88? What was I doing?
You did like everything in REbirth though.
Yeah,
you were like damn near close to 100% in that game.
There's just a couple of like hard mode mini games that I was like, I'm not doing this. Not Wave Race Dolphin 64. I'm not doing this.
And that's valid. But yeah, I played a lot of games. I really liked all the games I played. I spend most of my time in new releases every year. But we'll see how that changes next year.
Jeff, you already kind of mentioned this, but I just love this percentage of playtime for the remaster of a 20-year-old game.
Yeah. No, you can tell that my Steam review page is vastly different from y'all's. I played a grand total of 23 games. I think Austin played 23 Xbox games. And Steam is like the number one thing I play games on. I mean, none of this is counting my hours on Fortnite, but we don't talk about that on this podcast.
Oh God, yeah,
don't
no, we
worry,
don't.
I'll edit that out for you.
We specifically don't talk about that on purpose.
Yeah. I too played a bunch of Helldivers. It was 12% of my total playtime, which was 108 hours. I don't know what you guys actually ended up hours wise in Helldivers 2. But if you ignore the dominant 40% Total War Rome Remastered, then Helldivers 2 is easily the game I played the most of this year. And the stat I'm most proud of is the fact that I don't have a keyboard versus controller stat. They just didn't calculate that for me because it's 0. All right, don't use a controller, y'all.
Boo.
Yeah, I did end up 52% controller on Steam this year, which is the first time I've ever had more controller than not. So that's definitely interesting.
My deepest condolences, Adam.
I think I had like 69% or something of that, or 68.
Nice
Controller. So I did play a little bit. Yeah. I should have just gone for 68, so we couldn't have made the nice joke. Damn it.
Well, one of the things that is just games of different genres have just gotten better at making them controller compatible than they were 10 years ago. Like there are definitely certain kinds of games that 10 years ago I would have never even thought of playing with a controller. But now, like almost everything that involves shooting something feels really good on a controller.
Yeah.
So I have like no problem playing shoot. Like, sure, you're never going to be as competitive as the guy with the mouse and keyboard, but I hate competitive shooters anyway, so that's fine.
I think pretty much all of my keyboard time came from Tactical Breach Wizards. I think that's the only game on Steam that I played on keyboard, but I mean, it worked really well on keyboard, obviously.
So I just want to round this out with talking about the future of this podcast a little bit, which sounds like way more foreboding than it's supposed to.
We're canceled. Goodbye, guys. It's been fun.
If you've listened to us for the last 6 months or so, first off, thank you. But secondly, like you'll notice it's been a little off from the games gone by thing, and that will continue to be the case occasionally going forward because we're 3 nerds that love Star Wars, and so we're probably going to talk about random Star Wars things throughout the year. But I do kind of want to get back to more of that, and so I can promise anyone listening that at the very least, February and March will be games that have gone by. After that, no promises, but we're going to get back to that a little bit. And just speaking of like that really was my favorite part of this podcast is kind of playing the older games and revisiting like there's a little bit of nostalgia involved. There's also a little bit of just like kind of remembering how games used to be and how timeless those like SNES graphics are. Because my favorite episode to do this year was Chrono Trigger. It was just such like a blast from the past. I just like really kind of enjoy getting those feelings of like, I think we played over Christmas break, me and Austin. So it was just like, I'm not worrying about work, and I'm just like with a cup of coffee in front of my computer, and I'm going back through, to 1000 AD and killing demon kings. and it was just a really great time. And it was right not too far after Akira Toriyama passed. So it kind of felt like kind of a homage to him. And I just really enjoyed that. Austin, what was your favorite episode to record this year?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be the oddball on this one because my favorite episode was the one that kind of misses the point of our podcast, but it kind of does in a way, right? My favorite episode was definitely Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's my favorite game of the year. Final Fantasy VII is a game that has gone by, right? So it counts. It qualifies. I just really love talking about the story changes and stuff that they're making and like hypothesizing and theorizing about that crap. I loved it when we did Remake. And I loved it when we did it with Rebirth. Like, I just really enjoy that. So I really like talking about Final Fantasy VII with you, Adam.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's all right.
That was never going to happen. We know.
You should have played Rebirth. It's okay. It's fine.
I don't know that I would say that, but it's okay.
well, Jeff, what was your favorite?
So I had the most fun recording the Pokemon Fire Red episode with y'all because that was a wide-wielding conversation that was not just about a game that had gone by, which it pains me to say that the remake of Pokemon Red has also gone by. Right?
Jesus, I know.
But it's a great episode where we got to talk about the entire franchise and our different experiences with it, and that's part of the reason this show is fun, right? Is that I think the three of us tend to have pretty different experiences, even with some of the same properties that we love so much. Now, having said that, I am so disappointed for realizing that we've picked all Japanese RPGs technically, and really should have picked Halo Reach. Sorry, y'all. That was my second favorite, but okay, it is what it is.
I really enjoyed the Pokemon episode too. That was easily my second favorite, and I think for a lot of the same reasons I was describing with Chrono Trigger, there was like a little bit of nostalgia for it. Just going back to like truly a simpler time in gaming, where the game was just what was in your face, and there's no bullshit they're trying to sell you on, and you're not worried about like what idiots on Twitter are doing to take the reputation of the game and anything else. Simpler times.
I also really liked those episodes. Don't get me wrong. I also really liked the games that have gone by. So,
well, you mentioned Halo Reach, Jeff. That actually was our best performing episode by a mile.
So many people.
We had 1,938 views on YouTube. I didn't even bother to check the actual podcast stats for this because they're typically not that high.
Sure.
There's about 195 watch hours, which is actually pretty incredible because I think the average time per viewer was like 6 minutes. So the fact that some people actually watch the whole thing is like great, or listen to, I should say. We got about a 2.1% click-through rate from the home screen, which I thought was cool. 2% of people who saw our thumbnail clicked it, which just gives like it's just little.
Let's go.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like it makes me feel so cool.
I was gonna say it's a little pride moment for you, Adam. You do the thumbnails, so good job.
I actually want to go through and redo like a lot of the old ones, but maybe one day. 16 comments on this, but there was one that just absolutely there's someone that was basically like, wow, I had to turn it off in the first few minutes due to lack of knowledge. I'm a super casual fan, and you guys don't know the difference between the Mjolnir 2 and the Mjolnir 3 armor. And I was just like, what are you talking about?
It was literally me not realizing that Master Chief was a Spartan 2 and not a Spartan 3 or something. That was a satire comment, Adam. That's what that was.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we should have just left it up and been like, this guy's clearly joking, right? No one would have this dumbass opinion. But I really thought that was funny because I feel like I have played all the Halo games casually, and I cannot even begin to tell you what Noble 6 was compared to Chiefs, like when they got their Spartan suits built.
And despite what my call sign would have you believe, I am not an expert gamer at all. Like I've never claimed to be super knowledgeable at Halo. So
gaming amateur and enthusiast.
Gaming amateur. I like that.
That actually works. We have to change it to that.
40 likes and 6 dislikes, which was a great ratio.
I'll take it.
70% of our viewers were between 25 and 34, which makes perfect sense. I don't think that surprises me at all. Nor does the fact that literally 0 women listen to it.
I mean,
unfortunately, that's just how it is.
It's all right. Well, it's okay. Maybe next time.
And to follow up on a couple of our episodes, I think The Acolyte was an interesting one because we spent a good 45 minutes speculating at about 48 hours before it was canceled. Speculating the next season,
which is
right?
Brutal.
Yeah.
I was like literally like 2 days later. I was like, guess what? Acolyte's been canceled, guys.
I didn't even get it edited and released before it was canceled, so that was kind of a bummer. But I know that the two of you have now watched a little bit of Skeleton Crew, which is like the next Star Wars show to come out. What are your thoughts on that?
So I've only seen the trailer, so I'll let Austin talk about the actual show.
Yeah, so I'm caught up on Skeleton Crew now. I've watched all of it that's been released. I think it's the first 4 episodes. And I've enjoyed it a lot. It's definitely has some like, I think people have been comparing it to like The Goonies a little bit. And it's kind of got like a Stranger Things vibe. It also even has like a little bit of like a Pirates vibe. Like the main premise is that these 4 kids like live on this planet and they stumble upon a spaceship and they're like blasted off into space on their own like, pirate adventure essentially. It's fun. It's charming. It's not too serious. I've actually really enjoyed it. But the thing that is not really surprising to me, but like kind of alarming, I guess, if you're Lucasfilm, is that the show appears to have less viewership than Acolyte did at its worst, and it couldn't even crack the top 10 like original streaming shows in its first or second week of release. So it's not looking good for the future of Skeleton Crew or potentially Star Wars at all.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys catch those headlines about like the movie project with Daisy Ridley being canceled or indefinitely delayed?
I think it's indefinitely put on hold or something like that.
Yeah,
is that going to be a trilogy?
It was something about bringing her back to the franchise to be like actual sequels to the Disney sequel movies, but they're having so much trouble writing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just like a one original film with her, but like in the future. I don't know if they had like necessarily planned a trilogy around it, but either way, it doesn't look like that's happening either.
Yeah,
or at least not anytime soon.
The only thing you can say definitively about Star Wars media right now is I think the Mandalorian movie is maybe even finished like shooting and, going into post-production, so...
I don't want to dwell too much on like why this might be the case, but I do think it's clear that just the simple act of something being Star Wars is just not enough to sell something anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a point in time where that was the case. I mean, think about Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. Good games, but also like sold a shitload primarily because they were the first Star Wars game to come out in forever. And I think now like the shows were probably the same way at the beginning. I mean, Mandalorian was huge, but as they just continue to release more and more that people don't seem to care about, it's just not happening anymore. And those numbers you mentioned, Austin, for Skeleton Crew, that just is so disappointing.
Yeah.
And I think
especially because it's fun. Like, it's a fun show.
Yeah. And you mentioned in these notes, like, there's a loud contingent of people that always complain about everything being tied to the Skywalker saga. But then if it's not, it's pretty clear that a lot of the casual audience doesn't show up. I mean, Obi-Wan did well, despite the fact that I think that show sucked. But it had Darth Vader and Obi-Wan in it, so people watched it. And people will complain about that, but ultimately that is what draws people to it, is the characters they're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing on Star Wars.
I'm about to say, we run a Star Wars podcast, so...
Following up the Outlaws episode, Ubisoft ended up putting out a series of updates that tweaked a bunch of things. And one of it is, I kind of jokingly put that they patched stealth out of the game. It's only halfway a joke, though, because they basically got rid of every remotely difficult stealthing part that was an automatic fail if you got caught. And also they just made it to where, like, everything can be shot through now. There's really no required stealth sections. And I don't think that's necessarily, like, a terrible thing. But in my mind, that just makes it, like, a much more uninteresting game. Because, like, I didn't find all of that fun to begin with. So I really enjoyed the stealth sections. I liked, upgrading all of the ability to dispatch, like, stronger enemies through stealth and have better, less detection from enemies and yada, yada, yada. But, like, a lot of people have seemed to picked it up since they patched it, so I guess I'm just in the wrong here.
I mean, I could definitely get behind, like, automatic failures feeling frustrating. Like, what I would have preferred to see them do is just them to make certain segments so difficult that if you don't do stealth, you just get gunned down, right? My favorite part of Outlaws was when, like, stormtrooper squads would ambush me, like, in the open, and I'm just like, oh, I'm fucked. Like, they just gunned me down. And so I can get behind them removing the automatic failures if they like made the different segments now really hard to do, right? But I don't think that's the case. And between that and being able to like carry a gun much more easier now, I'm probably just going to go like storm a couple of Imperial bases through the front gates, because why the hell not, you know?
Yeah, and then kind of continuing off of Outlaws, I was reading an article this year that was talking about like a study was done that showed that gamers spend far more time now watching videos about games than actually playing them. And I don't think that's like a totally awful thing. And a lot of it makes sense that like some people, you know, they got older and they have kids and this and that. And so they're just busier, and you can put on a YouTube video while you do your chores or while you're at work, right? So I don't think that's necessarily like crazy. But what bothers me is you can tell in online discussions that like tons of people feel totally fine with just participating in a discussion about a game they haven't played because their favorite YouTuber complained about it. Mm-hmm. And I can't fucking stand it.
Yeah.
I mean, responses that'll literally start with like, well, I haven't played it, but I heard that. Okay, then shut the fuck up and get out of here.
Like, you don't matter then.
I don't care what you heard. And that's really disappointing because I feel like, you know, it's not a game, but I feel like this happened to Acolyte. And then I also feel like it happened to Outlaws, where people just got wind from their edge lord rage bait YouTuber that these games suck because woke and this and that. And so now in their head, it's not worth engaging with. But like, I'm really glad that we played Star Wars, Outlaws, and watched Acolyte and did episodes, because they might be the one fucking take on the internet that is remotely sane about these two properties.
Right, that isn't just completely negative. Yeah,
100%. And let that be a lesson to y'all listeners, that it's important to like, you know, actually have local connections, like your own friends who have experiences, and don't base your whole worldview off of the handful of influencers whose content you happen to consume, right? And I think
except us, who put out sane and well thought out opinions.
I'm straight up telling you to go like disagree with me by having your own experiences. Don't take my word as fact, right? Like we're just having fun here. You guys, dear listener, please go have fun too.
If you feel like we're your only friends, I'm flattered, but also don't do it.
Go make other friends. Have fun.
There are better people out there. So,
all right, I think that kind of wraps it up. Oh, sorry, Austin, do you have something to say? Oh,
no, I was going to say I think that's pretty good. That's a pretty good stopping point.
Yeah, so you know, as I mentioned earlier, we are gonna have a couple games coming out in the next couple months here. So if you like the fact that we talked about old games, we are going to appease you over the next couple months here. And then it will almost certainly fall back into Star Wars at some point after that, but what are you going to do? Thanks again to everyone who has listened, and thanks to the two of you for a great year of games gone by.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Adam. Happy to be here.
That concludes our end of the year recap for 2024. We're excited to see what 2025 holds for our favorite pastime.
You can find this episode, as well as all of our previous episodes, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcasting platform.
And you can find us on all the social media at the Games Gone By podcast.
Signing off for Games Gone By, I'm Adam.
I'm Austin.
And I've made the most important decision of my life. Join the Helldivers.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Do-do-do-do-do.